Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Adweek webinar. We'll be looking at how to quantify the value of Snapchat advertising. And what we'll be looking at is some best practices in marketing measurement and marketing allocation and planning related to Snap. And today's webinar is being sponsored by Nielsen. I'm Stuart File, Custom Publishing Director of Adweek, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I just want to take a few minutes and make sure that everyone in our audience knows what to expect from today's presentation and is also familiar with the various features of our webinar platform. Our formal presentation should go somewhere in the 35, maybe 40-minute range. Afterwards, we are going to have plenty of time for audience Q&A. So if at any point during today's webinar you have a question for our speakers, please just simply use the Q&A tool on the left side of your screen to ask your questions, and we're going to get to as many audience questions as we can after the end of our presentation. We are supporting social sharing on today's webinar, so if you're out there on social, and that seems like a natural for the audience for a topic like this, please give us a shout out and be part of the social conversation. We'll be on Twitter on a lot of this, and we'll be using the hashtag you see there on the bottom left of the title slide, hashtag QuantifySnap. Pretty straightforward. So give us a shout out on Twitter. Post your photos, your GIFs, your memes, whatever you want to share. And of course, we'll also be tweeting it out from the Adweek Webinars Twitter feed at AW Webinars. It is not too late now to invite your colleagues to join us today, and we would love it if they would. About 15 minutes ago, everyone in the audience should have received a final reminder email from us about today's event. And in there, you'll find a link over to the registration page. It's in the form of a bit.ly. Share that link with your colleagues, have them register and join us live. There's still time for them to make it into the room, and if they can't make it live, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand. That on-demand recording should be live about hour and a half after the end of the live event. So keep your eyes peeled. We'll also be sending an email to all registrants with a link over to the on-demand version. So look in your email about 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern Time this afternoon for that. A few other quick things. One other feature I want to point out is the Event Resources tab. You should see that at the top of your screen. In there, you can find a PDF of today's deck. We often get people asking for that, so you can download the PDF of the slides from Event Resources. If you are joining this on demand, in the Event Resources tab, you'll also find an MP3 file of the audio track of today's webinar. So if you choose to engage with this as, say, you might a podcast, feel free to download that audio track. If you enjoy today's webinar, and we certainly hope that you do, we always urge you to check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars. We've got a few more coming up in the month of November, which is fast getting to the end, and we've also got a full December. So you'll see what we've got coming up for the rest of 2018 and soon into 2019. And also from the webinar calendar, you'll get access to our full archive of on-demand webinars. And over the course of 2018, we'll probably have done 80-plus webinars. So you've got access to all 80 of those that we've done over the past 12 months. So feel free to go in there, scroll back, see what we've got available if you haven't attended them. There's always a lot of great knowledge source and time for your own knowledge drop. Well, let's hop on over to today's webinar, and let me take a moment here and introduce our speakers. We are very happy to be joined by Josh Kowal. Josh is the SVP of Marketing Effectiveness over at Nielsen, who's our sponsor today, and he focuses on helping advertisers really of all sizes, all verticals, use advanced analytics to gain insights and optimize their future decisions. And we're also very happy, as we're covering Snapchat, to be joined by Garvin Roos, who's the manager of quantitative ad measurement over at Snap Inc. Snap, of course, being the parent of Snapchat, as we all know it, and he leads Snap's global program, helping ensure advertisers and their agency partners and measurement providers can responsibly and accurately measure Snapchat performance in their media mix modeling. So let me pass this on over to Josh to begin today's webinar. Over to you, Josh.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm sure all of you guys are aware there's just so many ways these days to reach your consumers. And actually new channels are appearing each and every day. But with all this clutter and all these touch points that you're engaging in the path of purchase, how can advertisers really understand what really drove your sales? That's where marketing mix modeling comes in. This is a methodology that has been around for a while, but it keeps on evolving to account for all these new channels and the new realities of marketers. And so the way marketing mix modeling works is, looking over at the left, is first you have to go and collect data of all the drivers of your business. Right? So this could be pricing, promotions, both online and offline media. And this is accounting for paid, owned, and earned. And also looking at things you can control that are non-marketing as well. Things like distribution, you're opening up a new store, you have a new product enhancement. But then also could be other external things as well, such as weather or seasonality or interest rate changes or even competitive factors such as competitive marketing or even competitive pricing or even competitive store openings. It's really a 360 view of your entire business. Once you have all this data for all your drivers identified and collected, then a statistical model is built to connect all of those drivers individually to some business outcome. Most common, it's sales, but it really varies by your type of business. For a retailer, it could be what is driving your store traffic, or it could be what is driving new subscriptions. So if you're a bank, a new account opening. So it really aligns to all of these drivers to whatever is your important business outcome. Once the model is built and these relationships are identified, that is where the kind of the fun begins, right? This is where you can look at, what is your marketing ROI for each of your investments? What you're looking at your saturation curves or diminishing returns curves? Are you at the right level of spend? And thus, what is the return you're going to get on your next dollar that you invest across all and each of your touch points? And also, what are the drivers of your sales, both marketing and non-marketing, that explain your growth or possibly even your decline in your business outcome? Nielsen is actually one of the largest or the largest marketing mix modeler in the world. We've been doing this for a long time, over 25 years. We currently have over 500 modelers and consultants around the world. We actually have an additional 50 dedicated to research and development, and that's really the team that really worked on this project as well, because we're really dedicated to making sure that the models are as precise and as relevant to the current marketing realities. We've done studies and folks all around the world. I think this year we've done around 1,100 different studies, and we measured the impact of over 50 billion ad dollars this year. So bringing us to Snap. So when Snap was really emerging as a new touch point and tool to really strongly engage with consumers, we saw some early challenges in making sure that the read can be as precise as possible. First of all, Snap is just some different ad types that are very unique, right? Obviously, you have Snap ads and filters and lenses. But that's very different from traditional digital, very different from other social platforms. And so, again, there's never kind of a one-size-fits-all when you're modeling and you account for those things. Add to that, kind of the way that these are executed, from being one-day executions, or some are continuous, or some pulsing. Those are all unique dynamics that need to be accounted for to maximize precision and accuracy. Also, Snap is really innovative, right? They're always evolving their products to make sure that the experience and how brands are interacting with consumers can be as strong as they can be. And so given that we have these unique ad types and they're evolving, that needed to be accounted for. They also were changing how you could buy it, from a national buy to audience level buys. And so given that improved accuracy of targeting, you need to account for that in the models. And then finally, through all of this, you're seeing a really rapid growth of the user base across all these different ad types. Finally, data is the key for all analytics, right? And so it's really trying to improve that data granularity. The way it would generally work is, in the early days of measuring Snap was historically we get it from the agencies, and it was not always necessarily at the proper level of granularity, or sometimes it was just pulled inconsistently from one media planner to the next. And so I just want to make sure we're using the best inputs that we can.
And really, for all those reasons that Josh laid out, is why we knew coming into last year that having a program in place to support this measurement was going to be absolutely critical for us as a business. MMM was going to be a priority because executions and activations with brands had finally evolved beyond experimental budgets, where they were now a big enough portion where mix is on the table. And as a result, it was in demand across all the advertisers that we work with. So as a result, we started commissioning studies to confirm the feasibility. And once we did, we knew we needed to do it, but the how, we just knew it had to be something different than partnerships to date, which could have been more like a data dump, or, oh, we flip a switch and we have access to all this granular data. Because as a platform, we have a unique app that's designed differently than other kind of social media peers that might be in the space. And as a result, we have different ads. We also have different data that supports those ads, and we've innovated at, I'd call it almost a searing pace, where things are constantly changing and constantly improving. And in tandem with that, by that time, we'd seen enough in market that we knew the industry and the analytics community as a whole wasn't really familiar with Snap. They didn't know about the platform, and they had gone about measuring it in ways that were similar to how it had been done before. So we knew there was an opportunity here. And really why at the core of our program, there's three pillars. First is data. Data is the no-brainer. We get it. It's kind of the fuel and the underlying foundation. But equally, if not more important, are the education and the expertise around what that data represents. It's part education on what those ads are, what's the data that represents those ads, and how is that data improved over time. When you think this typical study might look at 2015 through 2018, most of these ad products weren't even around back then, let alone the quality and granularity at which we track that data. The next piece is around expertise, which is identifying the underlying insights in what's actually driving the performance. Some things are going to be working, some things aren't going to work as hard, but what's actually driving that? Is it the way that it was bought? Is it the way that it was executed? Or is it a technical byproduct of maybe having less than ideal data or driving a campaign to be doing other things outside of just short-term returns? One of the ways that we do that is through commissioning studies like these. This is an opportunity for us to leverage the expertise that Nielsen has in CPG as a whole, as well as looking at a particular category that's been leaned into our platform. In this instance, we chose Alkbev and 5 different beer brands. And it's part about proving performance in an area that we don't always have visibility into. These are studies that are commissioned by brands, and brands typically own those results, and we don't always see how we're doing in all the different work that's happening outside of Snap. But it's equally about establishing best practices around the measurement itself. Not always knowing how you're doing, it's difficult to say, okay, then how should we be providing that data to know how it should be measured? Our nuances make us tricky, and it's compounded by the fact that a lot of people handling the data might not be as familiar with the platform and the products. And as more and more studies include Snap, it's critical that we're out in front of that, and we're identifying and at least providing guidance as a starting point of how this could be best done responsibly and accurately. And in doing so, we get it. We expect a healthy criticism with sharing a study like this. It's not ideal when you don't have all of your data. There's only so much syndicated data that's available. But know that we do this not to replace work that's already being done. We do this to complement work that's already being done. So one of the huge benefits of a study like this is that it allows us to look very deeply into Snap-specific business questions that any advertiser might have, and it allows us to find learning so that everybody doesn't have to learn the same lesson by trying the same products, trying the same mixes, trying the same weights over time, and you can quickly rise to the tides across all brands. So we go in with that being our number one goal. And here we looked at Outbev, those 5 beer brands that represented some $800 million in spend, of which Snap was roughly $12 million, spanning some 50-plus campaigns and roughly over 1 billion impressions. So a lot of weight, they've done a lot of different things, and it was a great opportunity for brands to learn from other brands in a very similar space, what's working and what might be opportunities to get even more out of that Snap-specific investment.
Okay, so thanks, Darwin, for the kind of the recap of the project. So again, the main objective was not necessarily how to maximize your Snap ROI, but really how to maximize the precision to make sure it is an accurate read as possible in order to make better business decisions. And so next 4 pages are going to be about what are the best practices. How do you maximize your precision of your models? So first is, this kind of sounds a little bit obvious, but it really makes a big difference, is getting the data directly from Snap. Snap, getting data directly from Snap, it really has a lot of benefits. One is they know exactly the level of granularity, the level of cuts, the level of richness that you need in order to model this with the most precision. Obviously, they can pull it. They have the pipe set up, and so it is guaranteed to be a lot more accurate than if a third party is pulling it. The granularity that you can get goes down to the market level, go down to each ad type, and of course, not only the impressions but also the spend as well. Kind of a side benefit of this is you don't have to go to your agency for it. Obviously, it's less of a burden on them, but also kind of cuts out the middleman, and it makes it much easier and kind of speeds up the process to get the data directly into the models. Next is make sure that you separate the national level data from the market level data. So, as Snap really ramped up their sophistication in their data pipes, some older data was only available at the national level, while the newer data was available at the market level. So this is important for precision, because if you think about, you run a campaign of, let's say, 50 million impressions, that 50 million impressions is not going to be distributed equally across all markets. You're going to have some DMAs or some markets that have a heavier concentration of the target audience that you're going after. So by getting the market level data and not just grouping it in with the national level, you're really improving the precision of the data inputs to align those impressions with the outcome that you want to try to achieve and influence. Next is, because Snap is so unique, it is so different from every other social platform, and really compared to any other digital advertising or traditional advertising as well, you really shouldn't be grouping it or aggregating it up with other vehicles or tactics. Just like similar how you wouldn't necessarily group together and try to measure search and video together, you should keep Snap out as separate variables. And this is really important because to avoid something called aggregation bias. When you're combining variables or do not act in a similar fashion, you risk introducing aggregation bias into your models and analysis, and that really significantly reduces your model precision and actionability. So therefore, whenever you have enough impressions within for a Snap activity, you want to go and break out as a separate variable from other social and other digital. And then finally, the last best practice is around even how you model Snap itself. So, Snap as a whole is so different from other social platforms, but even because of the different ad types, there are unique nuances in itself, and not only how you interact and engage with your consumers, but then also, how you buy them as well. So in a similar way, to minimize your aggregation bias, you want to try to separate lenses versus filters versus Snap ads as much as possible. Again, just making sure that you are getting the most precise measure and read on each of your activities to make sure you know exactly what is your return on investment, what's your effectiveness, but also what is the action you should take in terms of adding the next dollar to Snap versus all of your other marketing channels. All right. So, so that being said, that was the how to maximize precision was the main benefit, main objective of the study. But once we maximize precision, kind of what were the results coming out in terms of how did Snap results compare versus the other channels within your marketing mix? So the first result that came out is, how did Snap do relative to other media, both other digital and traditional? So what you're seeing here is, in the bar chart, is the return on investment. So 184 basically means that for every dollar invested in Snap, means you get $1.84 revenue in return. In the table below, you can see what the spend level was, the impressions, the CPM, and then the effectiveness is on the bottom. And effectiveness is how many more incremental sales you're getting for every per impression that you are putting into the marketplace. And so the key insights here is, first of all, Snap was twice as effective than other digital tactics. So that's a pretty significant difference. The CPM, though, was much more expensive, though. About CPM at the time was about 42% more than other digital. But because the effectiveness was so much greater, it overcame that CPM difference and led to an ROI of 184 versus 138 versus other digital, which is about 30% more efficient than other digital. Obviously, compared to traditional media, it really blew it out of the water in terms of what is your return on investment. Peeling the onion a little bit more of how did individual ad types perform. So obviously each individual ad type really did well. What we have here is what is the ROI difference for each ad type versus the all other media average ROI. So on whole is about almost 5x. With most, you see some hovering around 3, but 2 really stood out. You had national filters and self-serve API Snap ads, about 8 times the ROI of the overall media average. So all of them really outperformed the other alternatives when on an equal footing within the measurement. But this is not to say that you should just do those 2 at 8 times. There's really a place for each of them. It really depends on really what your objective is. So you look at things such as national lenses or national filters. Those are really meant not necessarily for short-term sales drivers, but really more for awareness and reach driving. So you really want to go and use the ad type that really aligns to your overall business objective for that particular campaign. Next, we looked at, because the Snap platform is all about engaging with your consumers, and so was there a different combination of ad types that improve performance? So we looked at, all right, if you just did a Snap ad by itself and combined it with the other different types of ad types, did it improve performance? So what we have here is, what are the different combinations and how does it improve effectiveness? And as you recall, effectiveness is the incremental sales you're getting per impression. So you can see when you run a filter along with the Snap ad, you saw effectiveness improve by 13%. But when you do a lens on top of a Snap ad, it improved effectiveness by an additional by 33%. Then if you do all 3 together, resulted in effectiveness that was 50% greater than just a Snap ad by itself. So, I mean, given the way that the consumers engage with your brand within Snapchat, having these multiple ad types really provide an incremental opportunity to drive engagement with your consumers or customers. So while it's always good to know what happened in the past and what was your ROI and what was your effectiveness, really what we all try to do is try to drive better decisions in the future of how do we change your media plan and get more efficient or drive more revenue. So part of this was to look at what does the shape and the shape of the response curve or saturation curve look like for each of these 5 brands, and how does it compare to where you are along that saturation curve or diminishing returns curve for TV, which was the largest spend and the most common spend for these 5 brands. So there's a lot of data on the slide, so let me kind of walk you through it. Each row is each of the 5 brands, so brand A, B, C, D, and E. Then you have in the gray, we have what happened if you had an extra $500,000 of spend. Okay? And using the response curve, using the saturation curve and where you are along the curve, what did that get you in terms of incremental revenue? So you have incremental revenue for $500,000 into TV for brand A versus an extra $500,000 of revenue for Snapchat for brand A. Okay? So the way you read that is $500,000 of extra revenue for TV generated for brand A an extra $300,000 of revenue from TV. Okay? Or the $500,000 of extra spend for Snapchat generated $900,000 of additional revenue for using Snapchat. Okay? So in the blue on the far right, you can see what is the difference between the two. Okay? So again, for brand A, the same $500,000, given where brand A was along their saturation curve, resulted in $600,000 additional revenue compared to they invested the same amount in TV. Okay? So now that I laid it all out, let's look at the individual results. You see that really for across the board, all 5 brands were much better off investing in Snap than additional TV. And part of that is because of the way that Snap engages with the consumers. Part of it is where the kind of sweet spot of the curve of Snapchat was. There was a lot more upside and marginal return for it as well, but also part of it was TV was saturated. Okay? So if you look at, for example, brands B, C, and E, that investing $500,000 more in TV actually generated no additional revenue for those 3 brands. That's because they're spending so much and they already hit diminishing returns on a serious scale. So again, this is going to be different for every brand, and depending on where you are, your current spend levels for both TV or your other tactics versus Snap. But what we've seen is that both this and other studies as well, that Snap is highly effective and generally underinvested compared to other media.
And really tying all those things back together, and with the overarching goal with this study and just the overall program being to continue to build our brand and portfolio planning playbooks. Again, not to debunk or replace results that are already out there from brand studies, but more so that we can cross-share learnings and findings across all brands so that everybody doesn't have to make the same test and learn agenda and kind of learn these things iteratively, so that we can put that playbook together. So if you're an advertiser who lives and dies by ROI and you measure that ROI through MMM, these are the key things that you should be thinking about as you plan and flight and ultimately measure that campaign. Starting with the left, the first is really that foundation, and that it starts with Snap ads, particularly Snap ads that are bought through the self-serve or API tool. So it's leveraging the suite of tools to capitalize on the cost efficiencies for relatively undervalued media in a marketplace. and also ease the execution in terms of the building of the creative and executing it. From there, with all the synergies, there's opportunities to complement with select camera marketing products. Some, like filters, we've seen work even when they were direct buys. Now, as we've expanded the auction, most, if not all, these products are available through the auction, meaning that there's a much more efficient way to execute things that were even efficient back then, let alone it's only going to get more efficient over time. Prioritizing even new products that, while we haven't had a chance to measure them yet, like reach and frequency lenses, where we see significantly lower costs, they've improved the measurability in terms of the actual flighting or delivery of the campaign, and without changing the ad or user experience. So you would expect that effectiveness holds, you can now do it at a fraction of the price, and it makes it more measurable. So as we continue to iterate on the types of data that we provide, the flighting and kind of delivery of that media to make it as measurable as possible, all of these things kind of coalesce to make this a much better storyline over time. So it's those two things together work then into the channel mix, which is probably one of the most, if not the most important, where if you're seeing strong returns from something that's underutilized, you're literally leaving money on the table by not testing the scalability of that tactic. So for these brands in this study, TV was a familiar tactic where they were comfortable spending at those levels. They had proven the performance of those ads, and that familiarity, by not shifting any funds to test how much more something can do, means that for every dollar you're leaving money on the table, which is, it's very important in a world where ROI matters, ROI is measured, and we should action off what we're seeing in those studies. By slowly shifting that spend to things that are underutilized to see how much further you can push it. And in reality, most of these brands, while there were one or two really early adopters that had heavily leaned in, a good number had still done kind of tentpole one-off activations, meaning that there's opportunity to scale in weeks that you're not already on air. These are actually new weeks where you might not see diminishing returns from saturation because you're not overlapping activity. There's still an audience that's engaged on a platform that you're not speaking to on a regular basis. And for advertisers, it's a huge benefit, where if those dollars are shifted into other things, it's layering on top of the same audience, which anybody who knows mix, with frequency being the driver of diminishing returns relative to reach, if you could be reaching more people at a more continuous level over time, that's also helping your measurability. It's kind of a no-brainer. It's just making sure that these lessons are out there, and that if there are other lessons, we're making sure that it's not a byproduct of a technical thing in terms of the quality of data, how it was measured, and that it's actually the performance of the ads. And all those really tie into the execute wisely, where it's understanding what you're using to measure it, setting the campaigns up with the right objectives, and then tying all these learnings back together so you can make more improved or informed decisions when planning future campaigns. And with that, I think we will now hand it over to Stuart for some Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you, Garvin, and thanks, Josh. Certainly our audience is getting a lot out of this, and some really fascinating findings out of this study. Just a lot going on, and I know we've got a lot of questions queued up, but I just want to remind our audience, if you do have a question related to our presentation today on quantifying the value of Snap advertising, just simply use the question tool on the left side of your screen, and we're going to get to as many audience questions as we can over the next 15 minutes or so. If we do not get to your question, and often we get more questions than we can handle, I always make sure that the questions get forwarded over to our sponsors so they do have the opportunity to reply to you offline. So if we don't get to it, doesn't mean that we haven't gotten it. It just means that, hey, we don't have a chance, but maybe someone will get you an answer later on. A few quick reminders. Number one, we often get these questions. How can we get a copy of the slides? And That's actually pretty easy. There's a PDF of the slides available in the Event Resources tab that you'll find at the top of your screen. So go over there and feel free to download today's deck and get some of these great findings. Also, the other question we often get is the event being recorded? And the answer there is a resounding yes. It is being recorded. It will be available on demand for about the next 12 months. So if you think your colleagues would benefit from some of this, feel free to share the link to the on-demand version with them. You'll be getting that link sometime this afternoon, probably about 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern Time in the email that we send out just as part of our follow-up process with you. So keep your eyes out for that and share the link to the on-demand version. So let's hop on over to some of the questions here. And maybe I'm going to give this to both of you, but Josh, let's start with you. When you were looking at the study, what was really, do you think, was sort of the biggest surprise that you found out of all of this?
I think that, to me, the biggest surprise is, after, first of all, what a big difference kind of the added granularity really made for Snap. I mean, granularity is always the key, but to model precision and actionability, but because Snap is such a unique and engaging channel, I think more so than many other tactics, that it probably made a bigger difference than usual. And so by getting the market level granularity, the ad type granularity, really gave us more confidence in the correct or accurate measurement of both the effectiveness, the ROI, and the saturation curve for future planning.
And Garvin, anything that surprised you? Anything, any learning that came out of this that you were surprised once you saw all of this?
I was. It's hard to put it in one word, but kind of the evolution of the platform is just so fast that even by the time we had gotten this study back, kind of digested all the findings, first seeing the impact of the better data, just certain things were, in the past we might capture camera marketing, when really it's a few different products, and our ability to tease those out separately is super important if we want to be able to look at things separately in these types of models. And as our data has improved over time, it's made it so much more actionable, so much more insightful. But at the same time, so many things have launched since then that, like if you looked at the CPMs in this deck, these are so different than what we see today just because of where the bidded marketplace has taken it, where the current CPM is. It's all things that point to, wow, these are even much more efficient today. And the products themselves, that now you can buy lenses that aren't just one-day things. You can actually do it through the auction. It's all great for ROI. It's just how do we get this message out there, and how do we make sure that we're providing the best data to kind of keep up with that evolution and stay ahead of those best practices.
Yeah. Garvin, it's interesting because you bring up an interesting point, which is Snap is really changing at such a rapid rate, right? I mean, it's, you were not immediately in the advertising game early on, and then as you have been, your products are changing, and, a lot of this stuff is going on. So when someone is looking to build Snap into their media mix, with all these changes going on, how do they ultimately keep up and do it effectively? It sounds, of course, like things are continually improving and things are continually, there are all these new tools, but what would you give as sort of like the recommendation, the best way for someone to sort of stay on top of what's changing and how to sort of really plan effectively?
Yeah, and I think that's where the partnership for us has been key, and we look at it as a cross-functional partnership. So most times when we start kind of the analytics discussions, the brands kind of get Snap. The brand's analytic teams probably less so. At the measurement partner is almost no clue. Like, hey, this is a lot like Twitter, right? And it's okay. Let's start from the very beginning, and it's first making sure that everybody's on the same page as far as what are our objectives, how are we going to set this up. So that's kind of sales working with the comms teams to make sure that we're setting the campaigns up, knowing where this is going to end up down the line in terms of the right solution and the right objectives. And then from there, cross-sharing any learnings that we have from either studies like this that we've done, alternative solutions that we've done where we are starting to see things dovetail and kind of common themes across while NCS or Match Market or MMM might be different solutions, they could all be different vantage points of very similar themes. And the quicker we can cross-share that information and kind of educate all of the boats, everybody starts moving to a much better place, which has definitely been our goal. It's just a very grassroots, cross-functional led effort that it's pounding the pavement and talking to a lot of people.
Josh, as one's looking at fitting Snap in, in that sort of, let's call it multi-platform program, right? As people are doing their modeling and deciding how they're going to actually be spending their dollars out there. As you're doing this, have you discovered how, does Snap fit? Where, I guess the question would be sort of where in the funnel do you see Snap really fitting based on some of the studies that you've done here? And what is maybe, does it have a different role than some other media types just due to the richer level of engagement and some of the things that you found out?
Oh, yes, that's a fantastic question. It definitely, we see that Snap definitely is not necessarily going to be your best just short-term, driver in terms of, you need to sell a bunch tomorrow, to execute a bunch of Snap. While, as we saw, Snap is a good short-term driver, medium-term driver, it's also just great at improving the overall path to purchase and the kind of the long-term awareness of your brand. And then Snap has different tactics which are better at short run versus kind of the longer run awareness objectives, such as the national filters and lenses. So, and this is kind of true for other tactics as well, right? Depending on how you execute it, determines if it's a short-term versus long-term driver. But the Snap, this really seems to be a powerful tool to drive that engagement for your overall marketing objectives.
And, Josh, just to sort of stay with you, one of the things that you brought up, and as you were going through this, and we got a question relating to that, and, you were showing some of the CPM figures earlier on one of your back slides, and it made this person realize, is CPM really even, in fact, the best measurement, right? This idea is you were looking at the return, and I think it was a 1.8 plus on some of the return on that, and you were talking about, again, the higher CPM of Snap, yet many buyers are under pressure, constantly looking to reduce CPMs and push that way. Is that really the best tactic for people to be taking today, or is that sort of a faulty measure? And are there other faulty measures that maybe appeared out of this that are sort of standard for media buyers today when they're looking at platforms like Snap or other digital channels that maybe they should be taking a slightly different tack on?
Well, I think no one's going to argue that or say that they should always be pushing to get lower costs. So I think everyone can agree on trying to reduce CPMs or on that. But it is balancing that relative cost with the effectiveness and how strong a particular tactic is at driving incremental sales. So in this example, even though at the time Snap had a CPM that was higher by, I think, 42% than all other digital, it was just so much more effective at driving incremental sales that it more than made up for it. So, I mean, it's a little bit of you get what you pay for, right? You have to pay a little bit more, invest, but in terms of what they got back in terms of return on investment, it was 30% higher than any of the digital alternatives.
Right. So, got it. Another question that came in, and this is actually a few people have asked this early on, Josh, and you mentioned, of course, that sort of your best practice number one, which is get your data directly from Snap. And so a lot of people here are asking, well, how do I do that? So is there any way that you can sort of fill in on that, or maybe Garvin, maybe that's a question for you. But Josh, let me direct it at you so you both don't start to answer at the same time.
Garvin, want to take this one from a broader perspective?
Yeah, it's as simple as reach out. MMM@Snap is a handle that you can use. Also, just reach out to myself, or your kind of agency team will have that contact on their corresponding Snap team. But probably the easiest way might be just MMM@Snap, or you can just send it to gruth@Snap. Happy to get you to the right people.
Got it.
And that,
go ahead,
actually, I'll add to it. So if you're working with Nielsen, because we're part of the preferred vendor program, just talking to your day-to-day analysts and consultants, we have the direct relationship with Snap, and so if it's part of your mix, we know the protocol, and actually we can get it directly from Snap on your behalf.
Okay. You guys gave an example. Obviously, you were looking at 5 beer brands, and that sort of is potentially transferable to a few other categories, right? I'm sure we can apply those learnings into CPG or something like that. But we have had a number of people asking about different industries, and of course, everyone always asks the question about the industry that they're involved in. But can you maybe give a sense of where you see Snap fitting in on a few other industry areas, for instance, and I'll actually talk. One is, we often see the question of, does this work in B2B? Or, you're looking at this right now at a national level, and even though you're looking at markets within the national level, does Snap, kind of fit in with, say, a retailer that only has a local or a regional presence? And how would you ultimately pursue that?
I could definitely jump on that first.
Great. Go ahead, Garvin.
And we've done about 4 studies now to date in this specific solution, a number in other types of like reaction closed loop measurement. In the MMM world, really across entertainment, retail, and now a couple different subcategories within CPG, we've seen shockingly similar findings, which was almost one of my biggest takeaways of how consistent some of these themes were. For even smaller or local, more kind of targeted businesses, the platform has evolved to such a place where we really do have products, depending on whatever that objective is, and the ability to hone in on exactly who you want to talk to. So it can be an excellent opportunity, even though there might not be kind of the research budgets there to kind of go through all these bells and whistles. The performance can still be there because the products have been created for all of those other kind of enterprise flagships that can then still be utilized and taken advantage of by all advertisers, regardless of category, regardless of size.
Great. I just want to remind our audience, if you do have a question, please feel free to ask it. I know we've got an awful lot of them queued up here, but again, I do want to make sure I can always forward this over to our speakers today. I think we actually have time for maybe one more question here as we're looking to sum up. And so, Josh, let's talk here about, you using here, the MMM model. Can you maybe give a sense of also, how does Snap, how does this maybe compare, in other modeling? If you're using something like, say, multi-touch attribution, or you're using a test control experiment, how do you sort of see the what you've done here in measuring Snap in MMM compared to those other techniques?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that each of the different analytic techniques that you mentioned have a place in your measurement portfolio. Test and control is definitely very strong for one-off and testing one thing at a time. So you want just test Snap and see what is the return and lift on that execution. That is a very, very strong methodology. Attribution modeling, or MTA. Is very tactical, using person-level data, being able to execute execute all of your different tactical dimensions, using a rich data set. But then marketing mix, which we focused on today, is the more strategic tool where you can compare across all of your touch points, both marketing and non-marketing, to make those type of comparisons of what should my total budget be, and what should my allocation be across all of my marketing channels. But I think across the platforms, the studies we've seen, which have been a lot of marketing mix and test and controls, that as Garvin said, we have definitely seen a fairly consistent return across brands and verticals, across both ad types and across different executions that advertisers are doing. Within the attribution space, Snap and is kind of working on improving their data pipes to get actually additional layer of data to get to that person level. So those results are still TBD.
Great. Well, Josh and Garvin, I want to thank you both for joining us today. I just want to point out to our audience that you've probably been staring at this, but if you do want to reach out to Josh and Garvin, you've got their email addresses here on the Q&A slide. So if you have your own follow-up questions, there's a way to directly reach out to them. And certainly, as they were talking about some of the data things and what you may need, they were making themselves available accordingly. I just want to provide a couple quick reminders here to our audience. If you want a copy of the slides, you'll find them in the Event Resources tab. Keep your eyes peeled later this afternoon for a link over to the on-demand version. It'll be in the thank you email you get about 3:30, 4 o'clock this afternoon. So share that with your colleagues, have them come and engage with some of this great knowledge and great content that Nielsen and Snap have shared today. So finally, again, we do recommend, if you enjoyed this webinar, please check out what we've got coming up from Adweek at www.adweek.com/webinars. Join us on some of our upcoming webinars, and certainly check out our archive of on-demand webinars there. Again, I want to thank our speakers today. I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day, and we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar.